Have you ever stood on the precipice of a decision that you knew, with absolute certainty, would divide your life into a before and an after? I'm not talking about picking a college or deciding to move to a new city. I'm talking about the kind of choice that challenges every moral fiber you possess, the kind of choice born not out of greed, but out of the raw, guttural desperation of survival. My name is Maya, and when I was 21 years old, I found myself standing in that very shadows. Before we dive into the deep end of this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been so broke that you looked at a dollar bill like it was a lifeline? Have you ever had to choose between a box of diapers and your own dinner? If you've ever been in a spot where the world felt like it was closing in, drop a comment below. Let's talk about that resilience. And if you're ready for a story that takes you from the darkest corners of poverty to the brightest halls of a life you won't believe, make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss where this goes. It started in a place I call the gray zone. It was a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that the city had long since forgotten. The streetlights flickered with a rhythmic buzz, and the air always smelled faintly of damp concrete and exhaust. Inside those walls, it was just me and my daughter, Lily. She was barely 6 months old, a bundle of soft curls and wide, questioning eyes that seemed to ask me, "Mom, why is it so cold in here?" I had been a straight-A student in my first year of university, dreaming of a career in social work. Then came the positive test, the sudden departure of a man who wasn't ready to be a father, and the crushing reality of the American dream turning into a nightmare. I worked 3 jobs. I cleaned a dental office at 40 a.m., waitressed during the lunch rush while my neighbor watched Lily for a few dollars, and spent my evenings trying to sell vintage clothes online. But the math never worked. The rent was $800. Daycare, if I could even find a spot, was $1,000. Electricity, heat, formula. It was a losing battle. I remember one Tuesday night, sitting on the linoleum floor of my kitchen, staring at an eviction notice that felt like a death warrant. I had exactly $12 in my bank account. Lily was asleep, her breathing the only peaceful thing in that apartment. I hadn't eaten anything but a sleeve of crackers in 2 days. That's when Cassie showed up. Cassie had been my best friend since kindergarten. She was the only one who didn't look at me with pity. She walked in, saw the notice on the table, and didn't say, "I'm sorry." Instead, she set down a bag of expensive groceries and a bottle of wine. "Maya, look at me," she said, her voice firm. "You are drowning, and you're trying to swim with an anchor tied to your feet. There is a way out. It's not what we talked about in high school, but it's safe and it's private." She introduced me to a world I only knew through whispers and judgmental news segments, the world of high-end digital companionship. "It's called the Velvet Room," she explained. "It's a platform where men, mostly older, wealthy, and incredibly lonely, pay just to have a conversation with someone who actually listens. No one has to know your real name. No one knows where you live. You sit in front of your laptop, you smile, you listen to their stories about their dead wives or their estranged children, and they tip you more in an hour than you make in a month at the diner." I was horrified. "I can't do that, Cassie. I'm a mom." "What if someone sees me?" "You use a ring light, you wear a wig if you want, and you block your local area," she countered. "Maya, Lily needs a warm house. She needs a mother who isn't crying in the shower every night. Just try it. One night. If you hate it, you never log back in." Desperation is a powerful motivator. That night, after Lily was tucked into her crib, I set up my old laptop. I put on a dress I'd saved for a date that never happened, did my makeup by the light of a desk lamp, and created an account under the name Luna. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would bruise my ribs. The first person to enter my chat was a man named Arthur62. He didn't ask for anything vulgar. He asked me what I was reading. We spent 2 hours talking about classic literature and his garden in Connecticut. When he logged off, he left a tip of $200. I sat there, staring at the screen, tears blurring my vision. $200. That was 20 hours of scrubbing floors. For the next month, I lived a double life. By day, I was the tired mom in the stained hoodie, counting pennies at the grocery store. By night, I was Luna, the girl with the soft voice and the empathetic ear. I learned the rhythm of the work. It wasn't about the body, it was about the ego. These men wanted to feel seen. They wanted to feel like they still mattered in a world that had moved on without them. But as my bank account grew, so did the special requests. The platform had tiers. The more you were willing to do, the more you made. I stayed in the conversation tier for a long time, but the bills kept coming. Lily needed a specialist for a recurring ear infection. The car's transmission was screaming for mercy. One evening, a regular named the architect made me an offer. He wanted a private performance. He wanted me to put on music and dance for him slowly, elegantly, removing my outer layers until I was in my lingerie. Just one song, 5 minutes, the price $1,000. I looked at the accept button. $1,000. That was the transmission. That was the medical bill. That was a month of breathing room. I looked at the monitor on the desk showing Lily sleeping peacefully. I thought about the mold growing in the corner of her bedroom that I couldn't afford to have treated. I hit the button. The music started, a slow, soulful jazz track. I moved with a grace I didn't know I possessed, focusing on a spot just above the camera. When the song ended, the ping of the deposit notification was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I closed the laptop immediately, went into the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. I didn't feel dirty, but I felt different. I felt like I had crossed a bridge and burned it behind me. That dance changed the trajectory of everything. Word spread on the platform about Luna. I wasn't just a talker anymore, I was a performer. The tips became larger, the men more elite. I moved us out of the gray zone and into a clean, bright two-bedroom apartment in a safe part of town. I bought Lily a crib that didn't creak and clothes that didn't have holes. And then I met Julian. Julian didn't show up with a loud entrance. He was quiet. His profile had no picture, just a simple username and Everett. He didn't want to dance. He didn't even want to see my face at first. He just wanted to hear me read poetry. For 3 weeks, he paid me $500 an hour just to read him Mary Oliver and T.S. Eliot. He told me he was 79 years old. He had built a real estate empire from nothing, lost his wife to cancer a decade ago, and his only son lived in London, only calling on birthdays. He was surrounded by beauty, paintings, gardens, marble, but he was starving for a human connection that didn't feel like a transaction. One night, after I finished reading The Waste Land, he was silent for a long time. "Luna," he said, his voice crackling through the speakers. "I know who you are. Not your name, not your address, but I know your spirit. I can hear the mother in your voice. I can hear the struggle you've been through." My breath hitched. "Everyone is struggling with something, Everett." "True," he replied. "But not everyone carries it with such dignity. I have a proposition for you. It is the most unusual thing I have ever asked of anyone, and I want you to take 48 hours to think about it before you answer." He told me he wanted to meet me in person. He wanted to invite me to his estate, the Willow House, for a single evening. He wanted a private dinner and one final, live performance. In exchange for that one night, he would pay me $25,000. $25,000. That was life-changing money. That was a college fund. That was a down payment on a house. That was the end of the velvet room. Forever. He assured me of my safety. A private driver would pick me up and drop me off. A housekeeper would be present in the home at all times. I would be respected and cherished. I didn't need 48 hours. I needed 5 minutes. I thought about the life I wanted for Lily. I thought about the man who had listened to me read poetry for 3 weeks without ever making a crude comment. I thought about the fear I'd lived with for 2 years. "I'll do it," I typed. The following Saturday, a black sedan pulled up to my new apartment. The driver, a man in his 60s named George, greeted me with a polite tip of his hat. As we drove away from the city, the buildings gave way to rolling hills and ancient oak trees. We passed through a set of iron gates and up a long, winding driveway lined with weeping willows that danced in the moonlight. The Willow House was a masterpiece of stone and glass. It glowed from within, a beacon of warmth in the dark countryside. When the doors opened, I wasn't met by a creep or a predator. I was met by a man who looked like he was carved from the very history of the world. Everett, whose real name was Arthur, was tall, silver-haired, and possessed a gaze that was both piercing and incredibly kind. "Welcome, Maya," he said. He used my real name. My heart stopped. "How did you?" "I'm a man with many resources," he said softly, gesturing for me to enter. "But please do not be afraid. I didn't bring you here to reveal your secrets. I brought you here because I needed to see if the woman behind the voice was as real as I imagined." The evening was like a dream. We sat in a dining room that could have hosted royalty, but the meal was simple and delicious. We talked about everything: my dreams for Lily, his regrets about his son, the state of the world. He was brilliant, funny, and deeply lonely. After dinner, he led me to a private library. A fire was crackling in the hearth, and the scent of old leather and cedar filled the air. "The final part of our agreement," he said, taking a seat in a velvet armchair. I went to the powder room to change. I had brought a dress of pure silk, a deep emerald green that caught the light of the fire. When I stepped back into the library, the music began, the same jazz track I danced to the first time, but this time it wasn't for a camera. It wasn't for an architect or a George. It was for this man who had seen me. I danced. I removed the silk, layer by layer, until I stood before him in the firelight. It wasn't a moment of shame. It was a moment of power. I was a woman who had survived, a woman who had provided, and a woman who was standing in her truth. When the music faded, Arthur didn't move. He didn't reach for me. He simply looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Beautiful," he whispered. "Absolutely beautiful, not the body, Maya, the soul. You are a warrior," handed me a silk robe, and we sat by the fire for another hour. Then he did something I will never forget. He reached into his desk and pulled out a check. It wasn't for $25,000. It was for 100,000. "Arthur, I can't take this," I stammered. "You can and you will," he said firmly. "This isn't for the dance, Maya. This is for the poetry. This is for the 2 hours a night where I felt like I wasn't waiting to die. Take this. Go back to school. Buy that house with the big backyard for Lily. And never, ever look back at that platform again." The ride home was a blur. I clutched my bag to my chest, the check tucked safely inside. When I got home, I went straight to Lily's room. I picked her up, held her close, and whispered, "We're home, baby. We're finally home." But that isn't where the story ends, not even close. A year later, I was back in school, finishing my degree. I had bought a small, charming cottage on the outskirts of the city. Lily was thriving in a wonderful prep school. I had kept in touch with Arthur through letters, real handwritten letters. We had become true friends, a strange but beautiful bond between a 22-year-old mother and an 80-year-old tycoon. Then I received a phone call from a law firm. Arthur had passed away peacefully in his sleep. I was devastated. He had been the grandfather I never had, the mentor I desperately needed. I attended his funeral, standing at the back, watching the powerful men in suits pay their respects to a man they only knew through business deals. After the service, the lawyer approached me. "Ems Miller, Mr. Beaumont left specific instructions for you. We need you to come to the office for the reading of the will." I was confused. I didn't expect anything more from him. He had already given me everything. When the lawyer sat me down, he opened a thick folder. Arthur Beaumont was a man who believed in investment. The lawyer began. He saw potential where others saw problems. In his final months, he made a major change to his estate. Aside from a generous trust for his son and his staff, he has named you, Maya Miller, as the primary beneficiary of the Beaumont Foundation. I nearly fell out of my chair. "But the foundation? But that's worth millions." "It is." the lawyer said, sliding a letter across the desk. He also left you the willow house. He wanted Lily to grow up with those weeping willows. He said every warrior needs a castle. I opened the letter. It was in Arthur's familiar, shaky hand. Maya, it read, I watched you for a year from afar. I saw you take that money and transform your life. I saw you help Cassie get her degree. I saw you donate to the shelter in your old neighborhood. I knew then that I hadn't just given money to a girl on a screen. I had invested in a force of nature. Use the foundation to find the other Mayas out there. The ones who are drowning. The ones who think they have to burn their souls to keep their children warm. Give them a bridge. Give them a light. You are the daughter I should have fought harder for. Live well, my dear, that was 10 years ago. Today I live in the Willow House. Lily is 11, a brilliant, compassionate girl who spends her afternoons reading in the very library where I once danced. The Beaumont Foundation is now the Luna Bridge Foundation. We have helped thousands of single mothers find housing, education, and legal support. We don't judge how they survived the gray zone. We only care about where they're going next. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the fire is crackling, I go into that library. I put on that old jazz track, and I think about the girl I was, the girl who was terrified, hungry, and standing on the edge of a cliff. I think about the velvet room and the choices I made. People ask me if I have regrets. They ask me if I'm ashamed of how I started. I look at my daughter. I look at the lives the foundation has saved. I look at the weeping willows dancing in the wind outside. No, I tell them, I'm not ashamed. I did what a mother does. I fought a war for my child's future, and I won. But the legacy of Arthur Beaumont didn't just end with a house and a check. It changed the way I look at every single person I pass on the street. It taught me that everyone has a story hidden behind their eyes, a story of loss, of hope, of hidden struggles. It taught me that a single act of radical, non-judgmental kindness can ripple out and change the world in ways you can't even imagine. I remember one woman who came to the foundation about 3 years ago. Her name was Elena. She was 23, with a toddler in her arms and a bruise on her cheek. She was terrified, broke, and convinced she was a bad person because of the things she'd done to escape an abusive relationship and keep her son fed. I sat her down in my office, the same office where I once stared at Arthur's letters. I didn't give her a lecture. I didn't give her a list of rules. I looked her in the eyes and I told her my story, every part of it. The velvet room, the dances, the fear, and the man who saw the warrior beneath the silk. I watched the weight lift off her shoulders. I watched the shame dissolve. You aren't a bad person, Elena, I told her. You're a survivor, and survivors aren't meant to just stay alive. They're meant to thrive. Let's build your bridge. Today, Elena is a registered nurse. Her son is thriving. She volunteers at the foundation every weekend. That is the real ending to this story. It's not about the money, and it's not about the mansion. It's about the chain reaction of grace. So, let me ask you one last thing as we wrap this up. If you saw someone struggling, someone making a choice you didn't understand, would you look for the why? Would you look for the warrior in them? I hope this story makes you think twice the next time you're quick to judge. I hope it reminds you that none of us are just the mistakes we've made or the desperation we've felt. We are the choices we make when someone finally hands us a light. If this story touched you, please share it. You never know who might be in their own gray zone right now, needing to hear that there is a way out. Hit that like button, and if you haven't yet, subscribe for more stories of the human spirit. And to all the warriors out there, the moms, the survivors, the ones who feel like the world has forgotten them, keep going. Your bridge is coming. Just keep your eyes on the light. This is Maya, signing off from the Willow House. Take care of each other. You might think that after the foundation took off and Lily grew older, my life would settle into a predictable rhythm of philanthropy and quiet country living. But life has a funny way of circling back to its origins. About 2 years ago, I received a message through the Foundation's private portal. It was from a man in London. His name was Thomas Beaumont, Arthur's son. I felt a sudden, sharp spike of anxiety. Thomas had been the one person I had never met. According to the lawyers, he hadn't contested the will, but he'd remained a silent, distant figure in the background of my new life. I'd always wondered if he hated me, if he saw me as the gold digger who had enchanted his father in his final years. The message was short: I am coming to the States. I would like to visit the Willow House. I believe there are things we need to discuss that cannot be said in an email. I prepared for a confrontation. I walked through the halls of the house, looking at the paintings and the furniture, feeling like an interloper for the first time in a decade. I rehearsed my defense. I would tell him how much Arthur meant to me. I would show him the Foundation's books to prove every penny was being used for good. When the day came, a man stepped out of a car who looked so much like Arthur it took my breath away. He had the same silver, streaked hair, the same tall frame, but his eyes were filled with a deep, wary sadness. We sat in the library, the room that had become the heart of my story. "I suppose you think I've come here to take it all back," Thomas said, his voice a deep baritone. The thought crossed my mind. I admitted, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. He looked around the room, his gaze resting on the photo of Arthur and Lily that sat on the mantel. "My father and we didn't understand each other," Thomas began. "He was a man of stone and steel. He wanted me to be just like him. When I chose art over real estate, he saw it as a betrayal. We spent 20 years speaking in sentences that were only 3 words long." He looked back at me. When I read the will, I was angry. Not because of the money, I've done well enough on my own, but because he had given his legacy to a stranger. I thought he was doing it to spite me, to show me that anyone was more deserving of his love than I was. "He didn't do it for spite, Thomas," I said softly. "I know that now," he said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of envelopes. My heart stopped. They were my letters. The letters I had written to Arthur over the years. "I found these in his desk after the funeral," Thomas said. "I didn't read them at first. I kept them in a drawer for years. But 6 months ago, my own daughter turned 18. She's a lot like you, Maya. Headstrong, brilliant, and fiercely protective of the people she loves. We had a fight, a bad one. She told me I didn't know how to see people for who they were, only for who I wanted them to be." He wiped his eyes. "I went to that drawer, and I read every single letter you wrote to my father. I read about your struggle. I read about how you saw him, not as a tycoon, but as a man who was lonely and full of poetry. I read about the Foundation and the women you were helping. And for the first time in my life, I understood my father." Thomas leaned forward. "He didn't give you this house to spite me. He gave it to you because you were the only person who actually saw him. You gave him a graceful ending, Maya. You gave him a reason to believe that the world could still be kind." We spent the afternoon talking, not about money or estates, but about Arthur. We shared stories and laughed, and for the first time, the Beaumont name felt like it truly belonged to all of us. Thomas didn't want the house. He wanted a connection. He wanted to be part of the Foundation. Today, Thomas is one of our biggest donors. He spends every summer at the Willow House, teaching Lily how to paint in the gardens. We are an unconventional family, born out of a digital screen, a silk dress, and a desperate mother's love, but we are a family nonetheless. And so, the story truly comes full circle. The Velvet Room taught me how to survive. Arthur taught me how to thrive, and Thomas taught me how to forgive. Life is rarely a straight line. It's a messy, beautiful, complicated web of connections. Sometimes the person who saves you is a stranger on a laptop. Sometimes the person you save is a man who has everything but feels like he has nothing. I'm still a mother. I'm still a warrior. But now, I'm also a bridge. And as I look out over the weeping willows tonight, I know that Arthur is smiling. The investment he made wasn't in property. It was in the human heart. And the returns. Well, those are infinite. Thank you for listening to the whole journey. It's a story I don't tell often, but I felt like someone out there needed to hear it today. Someone who is currently in the dark, wondering if the dawn will ever come. It will. Just keep moving. Just keep dancing. The light is closer than you think. As the years continue to roll by, I find myself spending more time in the quiet moments. Lily is off at university now, studying law. She wants to be a public defender. She wants to fight for the people who are caught in the gears of a system that doesn't see them. When I dropped her off at her dorm, she gave me a hug that nearly broke my ribs. "Thanks for everything, Mom," she whispered. "I know what it took. I know. I didn't have to explain it to her." She grew up in the halls of the foundation. She saw the faces of the women we helped. She knew that her castle was built on a foundation of grit and sacrifice. With the house quieter now, I spend a lot of time in the gardens. I've become quite the gardener myself, much like Arthur was. There's something meditative about pulling weeds, about clearing away the dead things to make room for new growth. It's a metaphor for my life, I suppose. I still have the ring light I used in that tiny apartment. It's in a box in the attic, along with the wig I never ended up wearing and the green silk dress. I can't bring myself to throw them away. They are artifacts of a war I won. Every now and then, I get a notification on my phone. An old contact from the platform, perhaps. I never open them. That world is a ghost to me now. But I never judge the girls who are still there. I know their names might be Luna, or Star, or Jade, but their hearts are the same as mine was, beating with the fierce rhythm of survival. One evening, not long ago, I was sitting on the porch as the sun began to set. A young woman walked up the driveway. She looked hesitant, her eyes darting toward the iron gates as if she expected them to slam shut. She was holding a flyer for the foundation. "Can I help you?" I asked, standing up. She looked at me, and I saw the gray zone in her eyes. It was a look I recognized instantly, the exhaustion, the fear, the tiny spark of hope that was almost extinguished. I heard this was a place for people who have nowhere else to go," she said, her voice trembling. I walked down the steps and took her hand. It was cold, just like mine used to be. "You're in the right place," I said. "Come inside. Let's have some tea. Tell me your story." As we walked through the double doors of the Willow House, I felt a familiar sense of peace. The house wasn't just a home anymore. It was a sanctuary. It was a living testament to the fact that no matter how you start, you have the power to change the ending. I led her into the library, and as the fire began to crackle, I started to listen. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is just to listen, to see them, to let them know that they aren't alone in the dark. And that is the real legacy of Luna. The bridge is always open, the light is always on, and the story is just getting started. I often think about the architect, or Walter, or any of those men from the platform. I wonder if they ever think about Luna. I wonder if they realize that their tips, their transactions, became the seeds of a revolution. Probably not to them. I was just a girl on a screen, a momentary escape from their own reality. But to me, they were the rungs on a ladder. It's a strange thing to be grateful for a path that was paved with so much fear and shame. But I am, because without that path, I wouldn't be the woman I am today. I wouldn't have the foundation. I wouldn't have met Arthur. I wouldn't know how to see the warrior in the broken. So, to anyone out there who feels like their current situation defines them, it doesn't. You are not your bank account. You are not your past. You are the potential of your next breath. If you need a bridge, look for it. It might not look like a mansion or $1 million foundation. It might look like a friend with a bag of groceries, a teacher who believes in you, or a stranger who actually listens. And when you find that bridge, cross it. Don't look back. Just keep going until you reach the weeping willows. They are waiting for you. I'm sitting here now, the stars coming out over the hills. The house is warm, the fire is low, and my heart is full. I've lived enough for 3 lifetimes, and yet, I feel like I'm just beginning to understand what it all means. It means love. It means resilience. It means that no matter how hard the world tries to dim your light, you have the power to set the sky on fire. This is Maya, this is my truth. And this is my promise to you: the dawn is coming. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And never, ever give up on the warrior inside you. Good night, everyone. The house breathes around me, a silent witness to the years of transformation. I sometimes walk through the halls at night, the moonlight spilling over the marble, and I can almost hear the echoes of the person I used to be. The girl who counted pennies, the woman who danced in the firelight, the mother who would have burned the world down to keep her daughter safe. There's a specific painting in the hallway that Thomas brought over on his last visit. It's an abstract piece, swirls of green and gold and deep, velvet black. He told me it was inspired by the letters I wrote to his father. He called it The Bridge. Whenever I'm having a difficult day, when the foundation's work feels overwhelming, or when the weight of the stories I hear gets too heavy, I stand in front of that painting. I look at the black and I remember the gray zone. I look at the gold and I remember the velvet room. And I look at the green and I remember the willow house. It reminds me that every life is a masterpiece in progress. I recently started writing a book. Not a haute on philanthropy, but a memoir. I want to call it The Velvet Bridge. My publisher wants me to leave out the parts about the digital platform. They say it's too controversial for a woman in my position. They want me to start the story at the Willow House, to make it a neat, clean tale of a young woman who was mentored by a wealthy benefactor. I told them no. If you leave out the darkness, I told them, the light doesn't mean anything. People don't need a fairy tale. They need to know that you can crawl through the mud and still come out clean on the other side. They need to know that the Luna in me is the reason the Maya in me is so strong. They eventually agreed, because you can't tell the story of a forest without talking about the winter. Lily read the first few chapters last week. She sat in the library for 3 hours, and when she came out, she didn't say anything. She just walked over and held me for a long time. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," she said. "I'm so proud that you're my mother." That was the only review I ever needed. As I prepare to finish this narration, I want to leave you with a final thought on worth. Society tries to tell us that our worth is tied to our productivity, our status, or our purity. But they're wrong. Your worth is inherent. It's in the way you keep going when you want to quit. It's in the way you protect the ones you love. It's in the way you find beauty in the middle of a storm. You are worth the mansion. You are worth the bridge. You are worth the poetry. Never let anyone, not a landlord, not a boss, and certainly not a computer screen, tell you otherwise. I'm going to turn off the recorder now. The fire is almost out, and the house is calling me to sleep. But before I go, I want to thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being a witness to my journey. We are all connected, you and I. Across the airwaves, across the screens, across the miles. We are all just people trying to find our way home. And as long as we keep sharing our truths, we will never be truly lost. Take a deep breath. Feel the strength in your bones, and know that you are capable of miracles. I'll see you at the Willow House. Good night. Oh wait, one last thing. I just noticed a small flower blooming in a pot by the window. It's a moonflower. It only opens at night. It's beautiful, delicate, and perfectly suited for the dark. Kind of like us, right? Okay, now I'm really going. Sleep well.